That'd be great. There we go. We're live. Awesome. Yeah, I trimmed it this week. All right, let's get rolling. I was just telling Mike that I think we've got the video figured out for doing live streaming in the sanctuary. I've got a line on some cameras that are relatively cheap and will work well with what we're doing. So looking forward to that. Nice thing is they're portable, so I could use them in here as well too. So voila. So today is, well, it's whatever we want it to be, but I wanted to start out by just kind of like recapping the stuff that I've been talking about at the semi-annual meeting, but then also, how many of you got a chance to watch that whole long, ridiculous video? Yeah. So let's start out this way. So one of the main things that I want to try and do this year is figure out what the new normal is. I'm sick of using that phrase, but I don't know another way to describe it. Is that the last 2 years have changed everybody, and they've changed churches. And you talk to any one of my colleagues, and they'll tell you it's not the same congregation that they had 2 years ago. And it's not just about numbers at in-person worship. It's just the dynamics have changed, right? So programs that were thriving pre-COVID are gone. Things that didn't exist pre-COVID are now thriving. And so kind of what I want to do is figure out, what's equilibrium for us. Before COVID, we had 2 worship services. Both of them had, kind of independent identities. We had pretty healthy communities for both of those worship services. And then, 2 years later, I don't know that we have currently the in-person numbers to justify going to 2. However, I'm stubborn, and I don't want to give up on it. So one of the ideas I'm flirting with is perhaps we don't need 2 Sunday morning services. But in talking to our younger folks, I wonder if there isn't a better time or space to do a second worship service. And to be honest with you, the demographic that I'm shooting this towards is all of our young parents. Because believe it or not, we've got a lot of them now. We had tons of COVID kids that were pumped out over the course of these past couple of years. I shouldn't use that terminology perhaps, but we have tons of babies to baptize going forward. Tons being relative, but so we've got a demographic within our community of people who are participating members of our community, but you haven't seen them because they got babies who aren't vaccinated. And all of them, to a T, have decided that they don't want to risk their infant's health. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them for that at all, right? And some of them participate. They watch the live stream of the services. Some of them just check in with me on a regular basis to see how things are going at the church. But I want to figure out if there's perhaps a better venue for that community. And I think that's going to be, honestly, a growing community. And it's not just about babies. I think that's a factor of it. But as we continue to do and this is an umbrella term, as we continue to expand our outreach work, which is clothing closet, it's cooking meals for shower cart nights, it's Jolly Jamboree, it's all of these different things that we have sprung up over the course of these past few years. Believe it or not, we have people that are getting connected to our congregation, but would never probably be worshiping members of our congregation. We have regular people that regularly participate in those events that want to be connected with what we're doing, right? But aren't necessarily people who would come to Sunday morning. And this is exciting to me Because this is exactly what I was dealing with in Fort Wayne. This exact scenario was what we built all of our programs around in Fort Wayne, was because we had essentially two communities. One community, well, we had three communities. One community was our worshiping community. One community was our concert community, right? So we had probably 40 to 50 volunteers that would volunteer to work shows, because it meant they got free tickets to the show, but also because they were passionate about music. And then we had a third community, which was a community of people that either volunteered in our outreach programs, which I've mentioned before. We had three of them, three major ones: Allen County Juvenile Center Ministry, homeless ministry, and music ministry to nursing homes. So that community was made up of either people that volunteered for those programs. So, for example, when I went to the ACJC on Tuesday evenings, I was there with three other people, and 90% of the time, those three people were not worshiping members. They were folks who wanted to do this work. They considered themselves part of our community, believe it or not, but that was how they participated. That was how they worshiped Jesus. But then also, part of that third community was people who were people that we ministered to. So it was family members of people at the nursing homes that we played music at. It was people who, believe it or not, people who we gave meals and socks and clothes to. They considered themselves part of our community. And I knew this because we would get calls on a regular basis from the hospital saying, so-and-so, and a name I don't recognize, has listed you as their church. Can you come bring them, whatever, communion or visitation or whatever. And then, of course, we had several young men and women who did their stint at Allen County Juvenile Center that actually then came back and participated in the church afterwards, or didn't, but still considered themselves part of the community. So what I'm watching happen here with us is kind of the seeds of that, right? And I know the past couple of years haven't been easy, because a lot of that work has been done primarily by Stephanie and kind of a few volunteers who have been really helping her. And Mike and Brenda and others have been really involved in that, and Lana and Ruby and many faces in this room I know have been involved in that work. And one of our obviously major goals is to expand greatly the people who are participating in these programs, and that's priority number one for us. But in all of this stuff, we have people that know who we are, who have never stepped foot inside this building, but think positively of our community, simply because they associate Milwaukee Lutheran Church with doing good things in our neighborhood, right? And when we had our trailer stolen and eventually returned, we had people that we had never met before writing us checks of multiple hundreds of dollars, because they knew how much of an impact that trailer made in the community, and they felt upset that somebody would try to damage that work. So this is a kind of a roundabout way of saying I'm really trying to figure out what's a way that we help connect this nebulous cloud of that community with our broader community, so that we at least know each other, right? And that's my primary goal. My primary goal right now isn't to make all of them, good worshiping confirmed Lutherans. I mean, that'd be great, but more importantly, I want to make sure that they feel like they belong. So that's up here. So as I'm thinking about what this second worshiping experience might look like, one of the things that I'm toying with is not in no way, shape, or form do I want to make it less about Jesus, because we never did that at C2G either, right? But how do we make it something that's more accessible if you weren't a cradle Lutheran? And one of the things that blows my mind is, so we've got a couple of friends that moved to Hood River, which cursed their names. They used to live in a house, I'm not even joking, literally 3 blocks from us. where we live now, but they moved like 4 years ago. So had they stayed in Portland, we would have been next door neighbors. It would have been amazing. But they live in Hudson River. And they texted me the other night, and they're like, hey, and they've got a little boy, Vincent, who is the same age as Emmy, and he looks like a young Matthew McConaughey. Like this child, he won the genetic lottery. He's got this long flowing hair, and he's got like this cherubic face. Anyways, so they're like, Vincent is starting to get to the age where he's wondering about these things. Would you mind if we came to one of your church services just so we could have that experience? I'm like, would I mind?
Yes, I mind.
Yes.
Don't
come. You're just gonna get scared. So I don't know. This is the world that I'm navigating now. It's such a strange one, and they're not unique either. You may have met our friends Matthew and Rhea, who brought their 2 little girls, Claire and Nora. They were here when were they here? Over Thanksgiving, and they came on Sunday morning for the same reason. I got to tell you this story as well too. So they were getting ready to leave. They were packing up their car to head back up to Maple Valley, Washington, and they were leaving the Sunday afternoon, right? So they had come to church and they were on the way out. And so Matthew asked Claire, who's the older one, so Claire, what did you think about Jesse's church this morning? And she just looked at me and she goes, good churching. Anyways, this really has nothing to do with anything. Okay, so that's one aspect. That's one big piece. And that really is kind of the center of a lot of things. The other piece is that, and I mentioned this at the semi-annual meeting, is that for those of us who are, here physically in this space and who have lamented these past couple years of not having this physical space to be in, also, we've got folks that have spun out of orbit, so to speak, right? Not by choice, right? I don't think there's any real animosity there, but we've got folks who have ongoing health issues, and again, this is the tough thing about the quote-unquote new normal, is that a lot of people are being forced to make a choice, right? Of, well, do I risk my health or the health of my loved one who's maybe immunocompromised or whatever, or do I continue to be kind of in this outer orbit of this community which meant so much to me? And we've got several people who are making the former choice. And so one of my other goals is to kind of like help bring people back into orbit, so to speak. Not out of any anxiety of we're shedding membership, but because I think as community we owe it to each other to try and come back into orbit. And so that's why I want to start doing more stuff at the Springs, because and thank goodness for this, by the way. I mean, I have no complaints about this at all, so I hope you don't take it that way. But we essentially have a secondary community now that's at the Springs, right? Milwaukee Lutheran controls the force, and at Roseville. I don't want to leave the Roseville folks out. And sorry, Kathy, and Willamette View. Yeah. But I think more and more it makes sense to instead of making you all, and I'm not, I'm using the plural, big plural, you all, drive down to the church. Well, why can't we just meet in the space there? Especially if the population that was like attending my Wednesday morning Bible study was almost they were all you guys were all hitching rides from the Springs anyways. Why should I make you drive down here when I can drive over there? So that's currently in process. So we'll do Ashes up there on Wednesday, and I've already reached out to them to see if I can find a regular space to do a Bible study there.
When are you having the Ashes here?
Wednesday, 11 to 1. So Linda and I will both be here until about 12:30, and then I'm taking off to go to the Springs to do Ashes there. So I'm for sure going to be bringing Ashes to a couple of homes of people that can't drive anywhere. But if you do know somebody that would like me to bring Ashes by, let me know. I've got about a 2-hour window Wednesday afternoon to do those.
Where do we drive?
Right up front there. we'll be out underneath the awning. So you can literally drive up the driveway, stay in your car, or get out, whatever's convenient. I don't expect that we're going to have too much of a traffic jam. It'll be faster than placing your McDonald's order, I can promise, I can promise that. Yeah,
But
so.
is there an app, Jesse, so we can,
No, sorry. Good question. We haven't developed, our tech support hasn't managed to develop that yet. There's no, yeah.
Jesse, besides you, who is our tech support?
Me. No, that's not true, actually. Jill Soley, one of our council members, has been doing she took over the website, which A, looks amazing, B, is staying updated way more often than I was ever able to do it, and C, I don't have to do it anymore. And she's doing it right now free of charge. I keep trying to convince her she should maybe, submit some work hours for that stuff, but she's doing a great job with it, and I'm extremely happy. And she knows way more about web stuff than I ever did. So. Eventually, it would be nice to get a couple of people. So I was telling Mike, the camera system I'm looking at for use in the sanctuary, you can have, I don't know, probably more than 3, but you can buy a package of 3 of these cameras. And then you can actually control them, so you can switch between cameras. This is going to go all over all of your heads, but I'm going to tell you anyway. You can download an app on your phone, right, which will allow you to choose which camera is showing up in the live stream. So it's something that I can theoretically do, right, on my own, because it's not like we're bouncing. This isn't the NFL, folks, right? We're not bouncing between the quarterback and, trying to track the ball or anything like that. But if I'm at the pulpit, we'll have a camera pointed at the pulpit. If I'm at the altar, we'll have a camera pointed at the altar, and then we'll have a camera pointed at everything. So when we're singing, I just tap a button, and that camera pops up. When I'm preaching or doing whatever, it's super easy. So I gotta admit, I'm pretty proud of myself for being able to figure this stuff out. And it's actually, this has been the miracle of the last 2 years. Is it's way easier than it was 2 years ago, right? This is all of the different stuff that's been developed because of the pressure of COVID. So, but good question. So if you're interested in learning anything, if you want to learn how to live stream, let me know. This may not be the fertile field for sowing those seeds, but I don't want to underestimate anybody. But if you got a child or a grandchild or somebody that's curious about that stuff, yeah, it's easy peasy. All right, what are you thinking about? What are the things that you miss or want to see, or just what have you been thinking about these past couple of years? Other than COVID and wars and stuff like that.
I think the choice you make for the adult ed class about who are your neighbors is a good one.
Thank you. I'm so in a very real way, this is, for me at least, a continuation of what we started 2 years ago. We put a pause in it. However, and Matt and Susan both participate with me on the land and housing cohort. We have learned a lot more about our neighborhoods during these 2 years than we knew 2 years ago. We have learned a lot of good stuff. And we knew 2 years ago that Milwaukee was changing. Now we really know it. It's changing significantly, and probably one of the easiest venues to see this in action is what's going on. I shouldn't put it that way. It's not like things are going to pop, but what are the struggles that our teachers are experiencing at Rao or at Lot Whitcomb or at Milwaukee High or any of the elementary schools in our area? Because that's a really good sampling of the demographic of our community, right? So it's important to know that not only does Rao and Milwaukee High do a lot of things together, no shockers there, but not only does the Rao Milwaukee High network have a Hispanic community liaison, they also have a Vietnamese community liaison, they have a Russian community liaison. So they've got people that are actually employed by North Clackamas School District who are tasked with reaching out to these communities, because these are communities that are broadly represented in our school district, right? And the other piece of it is just the overwhelming need for mental health care in our schools, and not just by our students, but by our students' parents, right, and family members. And so, one of the things to think about is that if our school is kind of a sampling of our broader community, there's a lot of stuff that is there's a lot of struggle in our broader community, and really what we're seeing is it's not just economic. I mean, the economic aspect is certainly there. Don't get me wrong. There are every week we're getting we're hearing about a family who is falling behind on one thing or the other. If you were here on Saturday, you would understand the need that's present, right? I mean, how many people were here? How fast, the stuff cleared out. Stephanie was sending me pictures of like, holy crap, this is a little bit overwhelming. But the economic need is there, but more than anything, it's been a rough 2 years for teachers and families, just in general, with the struggle to find childcare, people who have lost jobs, people who are working new jobs, people who have had healthcare crises that have been amplified. Either they had COVID or they've had medical procedures that have been postponed and postponed and postponed because there haven't been space for them to have those procedures. I mean, so there's a lot of stuff. And so, my hope is that over the next 5 weeks or so, it's not all going to be negative stuff, right? It's not going to be like just all depressing, the world is such an awful place. But my hope is that we'll begin to understand, like, hey, who lives here? I mean, and then also understand that the people that live along Lake Road, the people that live across 224 are different economic demographics, right? And it's become funny because people are like, really, we have that many Hispanic students at Rao? Because it's almost 30% at Rao. They're like, but we don't see them along Lake Road. I'm like, no, you don't. they don't live along Lake Road, right? They're either up across 224 where the new hillside development is going in, or they're further east towards 82nd, right? Is that this local microcosm is not the sum total of what comprises Milwaukee.
Jesse, when we were delivering desks right after COVID, there was an incredible amount of, we took a lot of on Causey between 82nd
Yep.
and 205. There's a whole community of people that belong to Rao Middle School there.
Yep.
And so, I mean, it just really opened our eyes to how far Rao Middle School stretches.
They have a huge catchment area.
Influence and everything.
Yeah, they have a huge catchment area. And that's always been one of the struggles for them as well, is because there is so much geographical spread in who they serve and who their students are. That compounds challenges, So like one of the things, talking to Katie Ray, who's at Wichita Center, and I think I've related this before, but one of the things that she talked about, which I've never thought about before, is, so when and this has happened multiple times over the last 2 years especially, so you've got a family, maybe it's a single mom with 2 kids, she loses employment, not long term, maybe she just can't work for 2 or 4 weeks, right, but can't afford rent. But they've got family that lives in Beaverton, so they go move in with the family in Beaverton so that they can get back on their feet, and then she can get a new apartment and they can move back. Here's the problem though. You got kids that have been going to Rao Middle School, and now they're being moved over to Beaverton for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months, who knows how long, right? Because you move a kid over in the middle of a semester, ideally you'd like to have them at least finish out the semester, in the same school. So this is something that actually has caused a lot of problems for the folks at Wichita Center, is trying to keep track of these families who they know are, in need, but really who they know that are, I don't want to say viable, that's not the right word, but they know if they can get that help, they can make it through, right? But how do you keep track of them? But then from the school district's perspective, how do you provide transportation? So according to, I don't know if this is Oregon state law, and I don't remember how many weeks it is, but if a student enrolls at a school for X number of weeks and they move, that school is required to provide transportation to that school. for X number of weeks. There's numbers associated with all, right?
Who does the driving?
So it's not always that they're sending a school bus. It's that they're providing transportation money to that family to, I don't know, take public transit, an Uber. There are buses whose sole job are to go pick up students in Hillsborough or Beaverton. And obviously there's a radius that they can go, right? You can't if a family moves to Pendleton, the kids aren't going to keep going to Rao.
And so for how long are they required to provide this transportation?
And I don't remember offhand. I'll have to go back to my notes from Katie. But yeah, I feel like it was 4 weeks or 8 weeks, something like that. But
they try to keep them in the same school.
Trying to keep them in the same school, right? Because that's one of those metrics where we can demonstrably prove that if a child can stay in the same school for the duration of a semester, they will perform better than if you move them in the middle of a semester, even if it's just 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks out and then back, right? Because realistically, they're not going to go to school for those 2 weeks.
And they might not be studying the same thing.
They're not, yeah, they're jumping into classes, yeah. Also, it would probably take them at least 8 weeks just to orient to their, it's so.
We delivered a death to Milwaukee and one to Wilson.
Wow.
Not far away.
Voila.
There
Yeah.
were kids that were enrolled in our class.
Yep. Yep.
Wow.
So, yeah. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back. So the first session next week will be less of this stuff. I'm going to go back and, because, the history of Milwaukee is absolutely fascinating. And because also the history of Milwaukee is very pertinent to who this community is. So one of the things I'm going to do next week is I'm going to go back to 1930s and cover, the transformation of Milwaukee, Oregon over the course of World War II and up into, where we're at nowadays. Because the transformation that happened here in a real way is similar to what's going on right now, where you've essentially got a whole new generation of people that are moving into homes here. So the people, you all are representative of this, and in some way as well, is that the people that are moving into Milwaukee are not retired folks necessarily. It's young families who can't afford to live in Southeast Portland, and probably are getting close to not being able to live in Milwaukee anymore either,
Right.
with the way housing prices have gone, right? Because we're watching the concentric rings of housing instability as they get pressed further and further out towards the suburbs, But the families that are moving in here, right, are not so dissimilar from folks, post-World War II economic boom as houses were, victory homes were going up all over the place in Milwaukee. It's really an interesting kind of thing. So I think it's helpful to know about our past as we try and, navigate the present. Also, I'm just fascinated by that stuff. So I'm going to make you suffer with me as we talk about it.
That's Lent, you're saying.
Yep, this is Lent. So probably week 1 will for sure be kind of like catching up on history. So that's next Sunday. But then week 2. So the reason I'm kind of hesitating a little bit is Stephanie is doing at least 2 sessions, but when Stephanie's going to be available is really entirely dependent on when her grandma dies. So Stephanie, if you weren't aware, has been the primary caretaker for her grandmother for the last who knows how long. And so she is really engaged right now walking her grandma through that process because she's the point person for her family right now. So I'm kind of trying to give her space so when she can take a deep breath and do that stuff. So she might be teaching session 4 and 5, which would be just fine, right? I'll find stuff to talk about. I don't have a problem with that. What other stuff? Any other ideas, questions, or?
It seems like you already answered the question of who our neighbor is.
Yeah. But don't prevent that from coming to from coming. Yeah.
I think the cat's already out of the bag.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah, and realistically, again, it's not like I'm making it sound maybe a little bit more drastic than it is. I just want to make sure that. Well, here, let me back up. So, my 4th year in seminary, I had to take a class called Reading the Context. And it's awful. Primarily, it was awful because the guy that was forced to teach it was a systematic theologian and knew nothing about contextual ministry.
Which one?
Gary Simpson.
Oh, well, Gary used to be here.
Yes, I know. I loved him. He's great. He's a great theologian. In terms of teaching contextual leadership, he wasn't super passionate about it. It was this really interesting thing where we get these lectures on the nature of perichoresis, and then our homework would be trying. Oh, this is a whole other story. So the whole course project was we were assigned a church in the greater St. Paul area, and we were supposed to take this software that was being developed. I don't know if it's Sierra Lutheran, right? Called Church Future Finder. Stupid name. But it was being developed not by software engineers in the US, but by software engineers in one of the Eastern Bloc countries.
Lithuania.
Now, could have been Latvia, yeah. Because believe it or not, there's a huge workforce of software developers in that region of the world. One of the disconnects was that the language didn't translate one-to-one. So anyways, we were forced to use this. So we were supposed to go into a church, discover all these data points, right? Like, take census data, plug it into Church Future Finder, and it was supposed to generate all these graphs and stuff for us, which it didn't do very well. And then we never knew what we were supposed to do with that data in the end. I think it never got past that because Gary was coming in, God bless him, teaching us about perichoresis. Which, if you're wondering, perichoresis describes the intricate dance between the persons of the Trinity. It's the interrelatedness of Trinitarian theology.
Which is what you're talking about in Milwaukee.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, so that was 18 years ago, right? And this is what people were thinking about then, was like, our churches need to know more about the neighborhood that they're in. And this is it in a nutshell, and I'll wrap up pretty quickly. It's because you all didn't move here at the same time, or many of you grew up in this region. But when Milwaukee Lutheran was in its heyday, and this is repeating myself, this church relatively represented Milwaukee, right? Like your neighbors went to church with you, and if you didn't go here, you went to the Presbyterian church, right? I can't tell you how many people I talked to that are members here. They're like, well, I started out in the Presbyterian church, then I got married and I ended up here. It's a common story, or vice versa. So you knew everybody that was in your neighborhood, and you were representative of people that were in Milwaukee. Complete difference in where we're at now. In that many of you have moved outside of the greater Milwaukee area, right? Okay, that's fine. That's part of life. Many of you haven't. Many of you are maybe in the same homes or moved within Milwaukee. But I think we can all acknowledge that the people we see at the grocery store, the people we see downtown Milwaukee, aren't the people we go to church with. And even, and wait, 2 years ago, we did the math on this, right? So if there were 600 people worshiping here, I can't remember what the population of Milwaukee was at that time, but it was significantly smaller than it is now. We were actually representative. Now we're like a fraction of a percent of the people that live in Milwaukee. So I think it's important for us to know who our neighbors are, because this is our church. this is our community. This is where we're physically at.
I just
yeah.
that, it seems like we lose our roots. The idea of a parish was just a geographic idea.
Yeah.
It was not that these people are holy enough to identify with.
Yeah.
It was that these people are our catchment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And
I always liked the thing with rogation and the agricultural parishes, where they walk the edges of God wants us to bless everything in this inside
geographically defined area.
Right? And it's easy to lose that in the complexity of society now. But I think there was a great deal of wisdom to it, which simply said those who could identify as having, come through the Red Sea, that everybody needs to come through a Red Sea sometime, and,
Yeah.
that's it. They're all your, Christ is in all of them.
We're all hooked up in a caravan together,
And
walking
if
through
you're
the
going to
desert.
meet Jesus, you better be serious
Yeah,
about that,
yeah.
right? And it sounds like we're coming back to that.
Yeah, totally. Very much.
There's a redemptive piece here.
Yeah.
In all the.
It is. Yeah, it is redemptive, and I think an important thing to understand too is that when we talk about this is our neighborhood, what I hear, right, which is maybe different than what people were hearing in 1968 or whatever. What I hear is that this is the geographical region that God has gifted us the privilege of serving. And I think that's important to be able to, not necessarily that we're drawing lines on a map, but it's important to be able to define this hyper-local area. Because otherwise, we end up, scrolling through the news every morning, anxious about everything. This is extremely comforting for me, to be able to say, you know what, I can't end the war in Ukraine, but I know that my faith community is helping to make sure that people don't lose their homes.
There are actually Ukrainians inside our catchment area.
There is.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely, there is a huge, well, huge might be an exaggeration, but we absolutely have a significant Ukrainian presence here. So what do you think? Great, Jim.
As far as the sense of community, I mean, now we have that Zoom community, which again I'm not comfortable with. I didn't grow up with that type of thing, but I know my sons and everything, that's almost the norm, and their children, it's totally the norm. And how do you muse about distant communities, as opposed to a geographic community?
So this is the oxymoron.
And that word community, I mean, there are people who come here for the music community here.
Yep.
And so the whole definition of community is taking on a whole other definition.
This is the oxymoron of this all. Is that we're sitting here talking about hyperlocal ministry, while at the same time, I'm relatively sure my dad watches our worship service at least every other Sunday. I can be careful what I say. And I know that people who are now physically here joined our community over the past 2 years because they started watching us. I fell in love. It might be a strong term, but were watching us. Had already planned to move to the Milwaukee area, and then joined Milwaukee Lutheran Church specifically because they had already gotten a taste for it. So we can never downplay the value of being able to produce virtual content. The struggle is always going to be how do we help them feel like they're part of our community as well too, if they want to be, right? Like, let's be honest. I'm going to hazard that most people that tune into whatever are just dropping in because they want to watch it for a little bit, but really don't have any intent. So it's like you got to sift. You're sifting for gold there in a lot of ways, which is something I always get a kick out of. Like, so many of our churches everybody went to virtual worship, and they were all like, "Oh my gosh, my worshiping numbers have tripled." I'm like, wait 2 months. You can't. It's not. It's like a one out of 10. That's optimistic of people. So when you count, virtual worshiping participants, maybe you can count one of them as out of 10 as being a physical worshiper.
And half has been that example more about TV evangelists, but it's strictly, strictly virtual.
And this is the tricky thing too. It's like ain't none of our ELCA congregations going to compete with any of the big name productions that are going on, right? And so this is one of the things is that I want to make sure that we all understand that, like, the reason we're doing live streaming is not because I anticipate having this live streaming, mega empire. So never going to happen, folks. Right? It's because I think even our physical community here, who, if you're somebody that comes on a, weekly basis, I think having a live streaming option serves you, because if you want to be able to tune in when you're home at sick or you're on vacation or whatever, being able to continue to participate in the worship life of the congregation has value to it. And additionally, I don't want to downplay either, we do have people who are pretty much virtual only right now. And it's a not insignificant number. Like, I'm not going to pretend like we got thousands of people, or even hundreds of people, or even dozens of people that are tuning in. But we've probably got a dozen that watch on a weekly basis, and they're part of our community, So, and also there's a distinction, and I don't know if this computes for any of you. When we all started to try and figure out the world of COVID and virtual stuff, everybody kind of went two directions. So some communities do everything over Zoom, which is interactive, right? So if you haven't used Zoom before, it's essentially a video call, but with a bunch of people, right? So worship in a Zoom setting is, I don't know if this is going to make sense to you, but you've got one person hosting, and you can do a worship service. So you can put pre-recorded videos that happen in the sanctuary, or you can have somebody in the sanctuary on the Zoom call doing all the churchy things, and then you've got everybody else that's in the Zoom call as well too, and you can see them, right? And have feedback. So one of the benefits of doing that is that you still kind of maintain some sense of community. Okay, we never did that, and the primary reason was that we didn't have the technological capabilities as a community to participate, nor the will to do that. Which is, we went route B, which was pre-recorded stuff, which I put a lot of thought into it. I could have live streamed on Sunday morning, just me in the sanctuary. The reason I decided to go the other direction is because I'm too much of a perfectionist. It's not me as being perfect, but I wanted to put out a better product. Meaning, I wanted to be able to have music from our musicians. I wanted it to sound good, which one of the challenges of our space, and one of the challenges of our space is it's really hard to record music in there unless we're doing like a big choral production. But if I just want to record like Mike on the piano and me, I can do that, but doing it live is really, really, really tough, right? Which is one of the struggles. I've got a good sound setup for the live stream, but getting the sound of the congregation singing is almost impossible unless we drop like $5,000 in choir mics that are hanging down over the congregation. It just isn't worth it. So anyways, we decided to go route B, which was recording everything. Okay. So one of the side effects of that is that we had this, relatively well produced. For a cable access show, it wasn't that bad. I'm being self-deprecating here. It was okay. I don't know where did this come from. Where was I going with this? What was the question? Maybe it's just a rip. Anyways. Oh no, I was just educating. So there's two different things here, right? So Zoom worship would be everybody's logged on, everybody's got faces. What we're doing now going forward is primarily live streaming, which means it's happening in real time, right? Like right now, there are people who are maybe, I can't see right now, watching what's going on, but they can't participate, right? Like they could, right? If I wanted to set up, they wanted to tweet in, or if I wanted to read chat while this is happening, which I'm not going to do because it's hard enough for me to keep my train of thought talking if I'm trying to like read, as was evidenced 2 weeks ago at the seminary meeting. So this is live streaming. Zoom would have a whole different thing, which we probably will do for like semi-annual meetings. Like I can do it better next time. I'll have it better set up. But meetings, easy. Adult ed, tough. So all of our stuff will be live streamed, meaning that you can watch it, and you can watch it from your TV, your computer, your phone, doesn't matter, right? Anything that can access YouTube, you can watch it on there, both live and recorded. So when we live stream something, it keeps a recording of it. So you can go back, and the other thing I have to do is it's currently using my personal YouTube account. At some point, I need to create a church account so that, because right now, if you go and you look at the thumbnail, which is that little image that shows up over the video, it's me rock climbing, which I imagine confuses a whole ton of people. And that was like 7 years ago when I was younger and thinner and in better shape, right? It was at Bishop, California. Anyways, so live streaming is it's watching TV that's happening live, essentially. You can actually put comments on the YouTube video, but I don't know why you would. If you're into that kind of thing. All right. Sound good?
Did something happen at 11:40 that stopped?
That one's working. That one stopped.
We've been looking at 11:40
Yeah. You're like, we got 20 minutes yet. No, it's 12:05. All right, folks. See you Wednesday or next week.